Hey everyone, my name is Elizabeth. I'm a solutions engineer on the corporate team, and today I'm going to show you how I demo GitHub Copilot. I have a Java web application that uses the Spring Boot framework and acts as an address book, so saving people's names, phone numbers, and email addresses. The data store is a MySQL database that's running inside a Docker container. It's pre-populated with data, and we're going to use this for testing purposes after the demo. And then during this demo, GitHub Copilot is going to help me complete my REST controller by adding additional API endpoints as well as the subsequent test cases. So a little bit of an overview of the application. I have a contact controller here, and this is where we're going to be adding the new API endpoints. I have a contact repository that's going to be interacting with my database with some predefined methods. And then I have a controller integration test class. It only has one method right now, or I should say test case, when it's associated with that save endpoint. And then I have a contact object, which is fairly straightforward. It uses the common getters and setters associated with a contact in an address book. So get name, get email, get phone number. The first thing I want to note is that GitHub Copilot takes into account the context of the application you're working in. So these predefined methods in the contact repository class, GitHub Copilot will likely reuse them so that the developer isn't wasting time recreating methods that already exist, and it really reduces that repetitive tasks as well as common patterns. So we want to make sure that we're following best practices within the application we're working in. So if I predefine a post mapping or a get mapping, we want to make sure GitHub Copilot is adjusting to the suggestions that I accept and that the patterns I like throughout this application. The first thing I want to do is add some input validation to my save endpoint. And what I'm going to add here is a check if name is already present in the database. When I press enter here, GitHub Copilot is going to synthesize the solution and then automatically provide that suggestion. Now you'll notice it is using that find by name, which is that predefined method in the contacts repository, and it's using the get name, which is that method within the contact object. It automatically detected that this is, I'm asking for a duplicate, and it's going to provide me a HTTP status response. I didn't ask it to do that, but it knows its best practices when you're working with a REST API to provide the user with enough context to fix the call if they've made something incorrect. So this is based on how GitHub Copilot was trained on open source, so it knows those best practices and provided that conflict for me. So I like this suggestion. I'm going to go ahead and accept it. And the next input validation I want to do is check valid phone with 10. Let's do digits, and let's do a dash separator. So when I press enter here, it's picked up a regex pattern that's commonly used for phone number validation. Now, I don't need to go to Stack Overflow to confirm this. This is a common pattern that it's automatically picked up while GitHub Copilot was trained. Then it's also going to provide an HTTP status of bad request and then provide an invalid phone number. Now, let's just say for hypothetically, I don't like this regex. So while using GitHub Copilot, you have some options here. So if I click this 3 dashes here, click open GitHub Copilot, for every suggestion it provides, it actually synthesizes 10 solutions that you can pick from. So say I wanted a little bit more validation. Here I can do string length or a different pattern matching. Maybe this one's looking for letters. I can adjust if I don't like the initial suggestion. Now I did like it, so I'm going to exit out of that and just accept what it had. But it's just a good note that you don't always have to accept that first suggestion. Now for adding the URL endpoints. Again, I didn't start typing there. GitHub Copilot knows that with REST controllers, a common call is to get all contacts. So I'm going to go ahead and accept this. I do want to add, though, just to give it a little help, to let's do return okay. Okay. Let's see if it returns all of the contacts. Yes, it uses that find all response status of okay, and it automatically picked up that it was a get mapping. So this looks good. That was a fairly straightforward one. And I didn't type anything there. It's suggesting this comment for me, and I'm going to accept it. It's pre-populated that get mapping and suggested a name endpoint. That looks okay to me. And I do wish it had a bit of a more validation here. So what I'm going to do is, let's add a return, oops, and check if contact exists. So let's see the suggestion it provides if I add that. So yeah, it provides a little more data. I just had to give it more instruction there. So it's going to take in a string name, find by name, contact, and making sure the contact exists. So yeah, that looks good to me. I'm going to go ahead and accept that. And the last one, okay, I didn't type that again, but let's see. Delete contact to return okay. I don't like that last part. Let's do delete contact by ID. No, let's delete contact by name and return no content. Yeah, that sounds good. No, I don't like that get mapping. Let's try a post. This is the traditional REST call with delete, so that looks good. Let's see here. So we have a contact by name found, and this repository contact delete by contact, it's thinking I want to delete by the entity. This isn't the case. I would have to implement this method. Sometimes it just suggests that maybe I want to do a little more work here. So what I'm going to do is actually accept this, but I'm going to edit this method here. I'm going to do delete contact by ID. And I grab the contact here, delete contact, and it's going to automatically pick up that contact ID from the contact repository class. Now that I've completed all my API endpoints, I can go into the controller integration test class and start writing my JUnit test cases. So the first test it suggested for me to write is the get all, which is the first endpoint that we implemented. I'm going to accept that. And then this is a good sign here. It actually picked up that for a find all, you want more than one, even though the pattern here is to have one contact, but here it's saved 3, and it's going to do that assert equals against 3 contacts rather than just one. Test contact by name, tab, accept. And because this is funny, so because I did accept the 3, it's thinking that I like that pattern. I don't really need 3 here, so I'm just going to delete these 2 and just keep that 1. I think that makes it more readable in terms of test cases. And then we'll do a test delete contact by ID. And here, save a new user, delete by contact ID, assert is equal to 0. So that looks good. So that's one of the, I just created an entire test suite based on the API that I just completed. And I find this to be one of the greatest benefits of Copilot is writing test cases, because a lot of kind of the repetitive things you do in test cases, for instance, test data, it's going to pre-populate, use what's already there, and just provide developers an easier way to implement their tests. Now I'm going to do a Maven package now that we have our test cases and all of our API endpoints. And this is going to run all of our JUnit tests as well. So we'll know if they've passed once this build passes. And once the tests have passed and the build has completed, I'm going to execute the jar from the target folder so that we can actually show you the new URL endpoints. I'm going to open a new terminal window here. And I have some pre-typed out endpoints. I may need to adjust them based on some suggestions that that I accepted in the ending of the names or the URL endpoint names. But let's just see here. Let's do the get all. And I have pre-populated the MySQL database with a couple values. I have a John at gmail.com and a Jane at Hotmail with a certain phone number. And I'm going to test that data validation. So I'm going to try to add Jane again. I get a 409, contact already exists. And then if I try to do a bad phone number, this one has too many digits on that save, I should say, I'll get that invalid phone number error. I'm going to test the contact by name, which is Jane. Oh, I forgot to change the endpoint there. I think Copilot named it name. Yep, and then we have Jane. So what I'm going to do now is actually delete Jane. This was the last endpoint that we implemented. And I get a 204, no content. Jane has been deleted. And just to verify, I'm going to get all contacts again, and you'll only see John. So what I've done there is just completed a Java web application and all of the API endpoints solely using Copilot, and I think that was close to like 10 minutes. So I appreciate you tuning in and showing the value of, and helping me show the value of GitHub Copilot.